Is international law achieving what it aims to? Can it right now? The International Criminal Court currently has arrest warrants out for the leaders of Hamas, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and Russia's President Vladimir Putin. That doesn't appear to have stopped the Russian leader today meeting with US representatives. In fact, though, if we step out a little bit, international law itself seems to be under pressure. The US have reportedly been threatening negotiators in one deal and facing new allegations themselves of war crimes in the Caribbean. Robert Volterra is a world-leading international lawyer and partner at Volterra Fietta. Robert, good afternoon. Robert, hello, are you there?
I am. Good afternoon.
Excellent. Robert, just in very layman's terms, can you explain for us, what is international law and what is the International Criminal Court meant to be achieving?
Well, those are both great questions. And of course, these are challenging times for the global community and make those questions much more relevant. International law is the law that governs relationships between countries. That means war, peace, the rules of war, the rules of peace. That means treaties, it means international human rights. It means trade. It means all the relationships at the state-to-state level between countries. It's a form of law that's different from any domestic legal system, and it's been around for a few hundred years, perhaps 500 or 600 years, but it's much less developed and sophisticated in terms of the precision of most of its rules than domestic law, say the English common law or Canadian law. I'm Canadian. So international law is primarily designed to prevent and reduce conflict between states by applying the rule of law and clear rules and norms to all the states in the international system. And now there are 193 or so. It's not a big community, but it's governed by very clear legal principles. Those principles are not the way you or I might want states to behave because you or I have a particular moral or ethical view of the world. It's designed to stop armed conflict and the horrendous human suffering that results from it. Just like any legal system, it is not perfect. It does not achieve results all the time. But just, for example, because there's a murder in the United Kingdom, people don't say, oh, right, that's it, throw away the law, it's no good. Most international law is applied all the time, every day, between states in hundreds of thousands of small interactions. And sometimes the world sees enormous violations of international law, like a war or a war crime. Just like in the United Kingdom, millions of people comply with millions of laws every single day, all the time, but we still occasionally see about a murder or whatever. The International Criminal Court is a very important step for the international community, but it has its limits. It's not a court of universal jurisdiction like the English high courts or the magistrates that enforce criminal law in the UK. It is an international organization that's called a court, and only the countries that have signed up to that international organization and court, only those countries are bound by the rules of the court. And only their nationals can be affected, properly understood by those rules of that court.
And other countries who aren't members can exert significant pressure. I mean, the president of the International Criminal Court said at the beginning of the meeting this week, they wouldn't bow to pressure from the United States and Russia. What kind of pressure are those two countries trying to apply?
Well, as I understand it, both of those countries are seeking to achieve certain outcomes, different outcomes. And the United States, for example, is not a party to that treaty. It is not a party to the Statute of Rome. It's not a state subject to the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. And for some 25, 30 years, various presidents of the United States consistently, not just Donald Trump, but consistently for the last 25, 30 years, have been entering into bilateral treaties with countries that are members of the criminal court to ensure that U.S. nationals are not inadvertently caught up in the procedures of the International Criminal Court. So the United States doesn't want any U.S. national, for example, its military, ever to be subject to the rules and proceedings in the International Criminal Court. As a non-party, it is perfectly entitled to do that. That is not illegal or inappropriate. The United Kingdom is party to any number of international treaties, which it must follow, but it's also not party to other treaties, and the United Kingdom would be grossly offended if other countries tried to make the UK subject to those treaties it hasn't signed.
We've got lots of tensions right now globally. We've already talked about, and we will get into more detail, the conversations that have been going on between US negotiators and President Putin just in the last few hours. But let's say a specific example. The Trump administration, as you've mentioned, America is not a member of the ICC, the International Criminal Court. The Trump administration is currently being accused of committing war crimes in the Caribbean, killing alleged drug traffickers. It blew up some boats. From your perspective as an international lawyer, would that be a war crime?
Well, again, that's an excellent question. And not to duck it, the answer is I don't know. I have not seen sufficient facts for such a determination to be made. I must say that one of the things that I constantly notice in the press of Western countries is the early and often inappropriate use of inflammatory conclusions as language. So a country does something I don't like, it's a war crime. I like a certain group of migrants, I call them a refugee. I don't like another group of migrants, and I call them illegal immigrants. These are just labels that are used, and they're not used precisely most of the time. There were a number of things that have been happening in the Caribbean. The facts are, as I understand them, that some U.S. Military planes and so on have been blowing up certain boats, and they seem to be staffed by people running drugs. But there is insufficient evidence on the basis of that to conclude that there is a war crime, because a war crime requires, whether under the Statute of Rome or just customary international law or the Geneva Conventions, it requires there to be an armed conflict. Is there an armed conflict in the Caribbean? I'm not certain. A situation of death caused by a military machine is not necessarily an armed conflict. And then there's all sorts of baggage, legal baggage that goes around that. So merely making an assertion of a legal conclusion based on certain facts, the details of which are not known, is not really going to move the needle, whether or not the US is part of the Statute of Rome and the ICC. The laws of war and international criminal law apply outside the ICC as well. They're custom. They apply generally, the Geneva Conventions and so on. Those will apply to the United States about how they can conduct armed conflict. But it's not clear to me that anything that's happened in the Caribbean is a violation.
Fulfills that criteria at this point. And it's interesting, actually, that rarely do we have sort of America and Russia bracketed in the same category as they were at the beginning of that meeting earlier this week. Robert, thank you for explaining some of the complexities. Robert Volterra, international lawyer.